The table was full, the wine poured, and every smile carried an edge. It was my parents' 40th anniversary, and somehow I had become the one who quietly made everything happen without ever being seen. The seating chart, the flowers, the food, I handled it all. No one asked, they just assumed I would. That's how it had always been. Sylvie sat 3 seats down, laughing like she owned the room. She told stories with wide arms and bright teeth, about her boutique, her new line, a mention in some magazine. My dad grinned. My mom nodded politely. I watched their faces as they listened to her, as if each word she spoke added to her worth. I didn't envy her success. I envied how effortlessly they celebrated it. Dessert came, something from a bakery she didn't even bother to claim credit for baking, and that's when she said it. She leaned forward, glass in hand, and looked right at me. "How does it feel," she said, "being the most useless one here?" There was laughter. Not loud, not cruel, but the kind that trickles like something sticky. My dad chuckled, deep and distracted. My mom gave a closed-mouth smile, the kind she uses when she doesn't want to seem cruel but doesn't intend to object either. Even Sylvie's husband smirked, like this was a familiar joke. Maybe it was. I didn't laugh. I didn't look away. Instead, I set my fork down, folded my hands in my lap, then raised my eyes to meet hers. "How does it feel?" I asked, "knowing the useless one won't be paying your bills anymore?" The silence was instant. Sharp. You could hear the jazz trio playing near the fountain, suddenly too loud against the quiet at the table. Someone coughed. A fork slipped from someone's hand and clinked against a plate. I didn't flinch. Sylvie's expression froze. Her smirk vanished. My father blinked once, then stared into his wine like he hoped the answer was there. My mother's hand hovered mid-air, still holding her fork like she'd forgotten what to do with it. I stood slowly. The legs of my chair scraped against the patio stones. No one tried to stop me. No one called out. I walked to the garden gate alone, past the lights I had strung up the night before, past the centerpieces I had arranged that morning. I didn't rush. I didn't cry. By the time I reached the street, my breath was even and my step steady. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. I felt unfinished. It wasn't just the joke. It was every moment that came before it. Every time I filled in the gap, cleaned the mess, stepped in quietly so no one else had to be uncomfortable. Every time I said yes because I thought that's what love looked like. Thought maybe they'd notice if I was useful enough. Thought I could earn my place if I just kept showing up. I remembered being 17 and giving my dad the money I'd saved for a school trip because the mortgage was overdue. I remembered taking extra shifts so Sylvie could focus on launching her dream. I remembered every check, every wire, every time I said, "It's fine," when it wasn't. Reliable. That's what my father called me. Not generous. Not kind. Reliable, like a machine. Back then, it felt like a compliment. Now it just felt like code for invisible. At home, I poured myself a glass of water and sat on the edge of my bed, shoes still on, bag still over my shoulder. My phone lit up with a group text, a blurry photo of the table, captioned, "What a perfect night." I watched the photo fade and didn't reply. Instead, I reached for my laptop and opened the folder labeled Records. Inside, years of transfers, receipts, co-signed loan agreements, tax returns I filed for other people. All of it in my name. None of it ever mentioned. None of it ever reimbursed. I wasn't angry. I was awake. For so long, I had mistaken endurance for belonging. But that night at the dinner table made it clear, my place wasn't permanent. It was conditional. And the condition was silence. Sylvie's words were meant to humiliate me. But they did something else. They reminded me that usefulness without respect isn't love. It's leverage. And I was done being leveraged. I closed the laptop, turned off my phone, and took a long breath. I didn't know what came next. But I knew it would start with no. After I left the dinner, I didn't turn on the TV or music when I got home. I just sat in the quiet and let it speak. It didn't echo like loneliness. It landed more like a truth I hadn't wanted to say out loud. The silence wasn't empty. It was honest. I thought about everything I'd done for that family. Not out of guilt, not because I had to, but because I thought it would mean something. Because I believed, in some part of me that still felt 14, that being useful would turn into being seen. That night, I opened the records folder again. I'd started it as a backup: bank transfers, cosigns, tuition wires, utility payments. But as the years passed, it became something else. Not just proof of what I gave, but quiet evidence of what no one ever acknowledged. There was a scan check from 2009, $3,500 for Sylvie's tuition shortfall. I was 23. She was partying in Atlanta, and I was working weekends for a non-profit that barely covered my own rent. She had cried on the phone, said she was going to lose her apartment. I wired it that night. She never mentioned it again. Next to it, another transfer, $2,000 for my parents' roof repair after the storm. No insurance payout, just a call from Mom that ended with, "We're not asking, of course. But if you happen to be able to," I said yes before she finished. I clicked through more: deposit for Sylvie's wedding venue, emergency payroll top-ups for her boutique, the business loan she never signed paperwork for. Over $100,000 in the past decade, all from my accounts. But it wasn't just the money. It was the way my name was always the footnote. The one who figured things out, handled the details, helped, like she always does. Never centered. Never celebrated. I remembered my father's voice the night I skipped a cousin's graduation to finalize a grant application. He didn't say he was proud. He just said, "That's my reliable girl." Reliable. Not brilliant. Not talented. Not loved. Just available. Like a faucet or a fuse box. Something you don't think about unless it breaks. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the wall. I wasn't angry, not yet. But I felt something shifting under the surface. Something like recognition. I had trained them, hadn't I? Every yes I said without hesitation had built this expectation. Every emergency I fixed silently became an assumed responsibility. And now the idea of me saying no didn't feel like a boundary. It felt like betrayal to them. I remembered one Christmas when Sylvie forgot to buy Mom a gift. She handed me cash and said, "Just get something and sign both our names." I did. I always did. I told myself it was easier that way. I told myself it didn't matter. But it did. It mattered that no one asked what I wanted for my birthday. That I had spent 3 years paying off a boutique lease I never signed for. That reliable was just their way of saying I didn't require gratitude. The next morning, I called the bank. I had been transferring $2,500 monthly into Sylvie's boutique account, just enough to keep things from collapsing. She never asked where the sudden stability came from. She assumed the storm had passed. "Cancel the auto transfer," I told the woman on the phone. She asked if I wanted to stop it for now or permanently. Permanently. I hung up, stood still for a moment, then made coffee in silence. My phone buzzed around noon. It was a message from Sylvie. "Hey, weird question. Did something bounce on your end? Landlord says rent's late." I didn't reply. An hour later, "Can you check? I think the boutique account's off." Still, I stayed quiet. The third message came in the evening. "Are you there?" I let it sit. That night, for the first time in years, I slept without waking up to check my bank balance or wondering if someone would need me in the morning. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even resentment. Not yet. It was just clarity. A quiet decision to stop trading pieces of myself for approval no one remembered to give. They had always called me reliable. But that night, as I drifted off to the hum of my own breath, I realized something. Reliable only matters when you're needed, not when you're loved. And I wasn't going to let that be enough anymore. The call came on a Tuesday night. I was already in bed, tea cooling beside me, a half-read book resting on my chest. When I saw her name on the screen, I knew it wasn't casual. Sylvie never called just to talk. "Hey," she started, too brightly. "Need a favor." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. She filled the silence, like she always did. "The boutique is doing great, really. But there's this new space next door. Perfect for expansion. The bank's offering a line of credit, but they want a cosigner. Just $75,000. She said it like she was asking for a lift to the airport. Like it was nothing. I sat up. $75,000 isn't nothing, Sylvie." "Oh, come on," she said, laughing softly. "You sit in that little apartment writing grants. No kids, no mortgage. You've got investments. It's not like you're curing cancer. That last part hit. Not for what it said, but for how easily she said it. I took a breath and answered plainly. No. There was a pause. Then, no as in, you won't help me? No as in I won't co-sign a $75,000 loan for someone who's never paid me back for anything. The brightness disappeared from her voice. You're being selfish. And just like that, the call ended. But her words didn't. I sat there with the phone in my hand, the word selfish echoing, not like an insult, but like a diagnosis I didn't recognize. I wasn't selfish. I was generous, dependable. I had given up weekends, money, opportunities. I had picked up every dropped ball, stitched every fraying seam. I was the one who didn't complain, who showed up, who stayed quiet. But to her, saying no once made me selfish. I stood up, walked to my desk, and opened the drawer. The folder was there, records, exactly where I'd left it. I typed in the password. Inside were years of choices. Not just numbers. Not just bank transfers. But a lifetime of being the fallback plan. $5,000 wired to cover Sylvie's unpaid tuition. $2,000 during the boutique's first lockdown. 3/4 worth of payroll. A loan agreement I signed without seeing the final terms. I had scanned and saved it all. Not for revenge. Just to remind myself I hadn't imagined it. At the bottom of the folder was the contract from 2015. Her signature. My 51% ownership in Juniper and Silk. She had cried when she signed it, overwhelmed and scared. I had liquidated nearly everything I owned to keep her business from folding. She didn't read the final line. I never mentioned it. I should have. But I didn't. Because I thought that's what family did. You help. You give. You disappear. But that night, something cracked. I closed the folder, my hand steady. She had called me selfish. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel ashamed. I felt awake. I had been subsidizing her lifestyle, her business, her mistakes, since I was 17. And every time she forgot, every time she told someone she'd figured it out, I had let her. I thought love meant invisibility. That if I stayed in the background long enough, someone would finally notice I was still standing there. But all it earned me was silence and expectation. The next day, she texted. Can we talk? I think you misunderstood. Then. I didn't mean what I said. I just panicked. And finally. Fine. Thanks for nothing. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I opened a blank document and wrote down everything I had paid for. Every dime. Every favor. Every agreement. Not for her. For me. To remember that none of it had been small. That just helping wasn't free. That being the reliable one had a cost. And that maybe, just maybe, saying no didn't make me cruel. It made me whole. By the weekend, I knew I wouldn't answer her again. Not until she saw me as a person, not a resource. Not until she could sit across from me and acknowledge, really acknowledge, what I had carried. And if she couldn't? Then I would carry myself. Because that night, I realized something simple and painful and freeing. Being needed isn't the same as being valued. And I was done mistaking one for the other. The silence didn't last long. By Friday, my phone was buzzing every few hours. Texts from Sylvie, missed calls from my father, voice messages that started polite and turned anxious. It wasn't just noise. It was panic disguised as confusion. Landlord called. Rent bounced. Are you late on something? Then. Suppliers are threatening legal action. Did you send anything this month? And finally. I don't know what's happening, Karen. Can you call me? Please. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to punish her. I just didn't owe anyone an explanation for pausing a train I'd been powering alone for years. They never asked how it ran, only assumed it would always be there. Saturday morning, the buzzer rang. I didn't need to ask who it was. When I opened the door, Sylvie swept in like she still had a key. My father followed behind, slower, surveying the space like it might disappoint him. You cut me off, Sylvie said, arms crossed. The boutique is in crisis. My suppliers are furious. The rent's overdue. You can't just. I did, I interrupted. And I won't be restarting it. You don't get to just decide that, she snapped. Not when we're this far in. I've been deciding it for years, I said, walking calmly to the side table. You just never noticed. I pulled out the leather-bound folder, placed it on the coffee table, and opened it. Inside was everything I had kept quietly: receipts, transfer records, loan agreements, emails. The architecture of a decade-long silence. My father's jaw tightened as he leaned over. Sylvie's hands hovered, unsure whether to reach or recoil. This isn't how family works, he said. We don't keep score. No, I said. You just don't like when the math is out loud. I didn't yell. I didn't explain. I pointed, softly, clearly, to the wire transfers that kept the boutique's lights on. The $5,000 for her missed tuition. The monthly deposits to cover payroll. The lease bailout during lockdown. Then I turned to the final document. The contract. Notarized. Dated. Ownership stake, 51%. You signed it, I said, looking directly at Sylvie. March 2015. You were crying. Your business was about to fold. I liquidated everything I had. She blinked, like hearing her own history for the first time. You didn't tell me that, she said, voice shaking. You didn't say it meant ownership. You didn't ask, I replied. You were desperate. I helped. And then I disappeared so you could keep believing you did it all yourself. My father stepped between us. This ends now, he said firmly. You'll reinstate the payment. We can't afford this chaos. Karen, you have the means. You will help your sister. He spoke like I was a teenager again, like the last decade hadn't aged me in a way they refused to see. I already have, I said, steady. I helped when she cried every night. When she thought the boutique was done. When she couldn't make payroll. I gave her my entire investment cushion. $60,000. Quietly. No interest. No applause. You're being petty, Sylvie muttered. No, I said, almost gently. I'm being visible. Her face twisted. Pride, shame, maybe recognition. You didn't have to humiliate me, she said. Not in front of everyone. You called me useless, I reminded her. I just corrected the record. For a moment, no one spoke. Sylvie grabbed the folder and scanned the pages. Her hands trembled slightly as her eyes moved line to line. You've been keeping track, she said. No, I said. I've been carrying it. There's a difference. My father shook his head. We've always said you were the strong one. The reliable one. You said it like it was a compliment, I said, but it wasn't. It was a permission slip to overlook me. They weren't used to this version of me. The one who didn't fold under the weight of guilt. The one who could sit in discomfort and not flinch. You wanted me to fix it? I said, folding my arms. I just did. Sylvie stood frozen, still holding the folder like it might bite her. You can call me selfish, I added, but I think you're just surprised that I finally said no. They didn't respond. When they left, I didn't follow them out. I closed the door quietly and leaned against it, the air in my apartment still and heavy. But it wasn't the weight of guilt this time. It was release. I had told the truth, not with anger, but with clarity. And for once, I didn't feel like the lesser daughter. I felt like the adult in the room. That night, I canceled every remaining scheduled payment from my account. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel cruel. I felt clean. I thought the silence was the end of it. That once I stopped funding the illusion, the show would finally close. But then the envelope came, plain, official, and unmistakably deliberate. At first, I thought it was a mistake. A clerical error. A formality. But when I opened it, my hands didn't shake. My eyes didn't blink. I read the words slowly. Plaintiff, Sylvie Reynolds. Defendant, Karen Reynolds. Claim, coercion, undue influence, and emotional manipulation. So that was her move. She was trying to erase everything with a signature. Not mine, hers. A signature she had put on paper 10 years ago when she needed me most. My lawyer, a quiet woman named Elise, looked over the documents with the expression of someone reading a bad script. She's throwing spaghetti at the wall, she said. Nothing in here will stick. I nodded, but it wasn't comfort I needed. It was clarity. And that would come later. The court date came fast. I didn't tell anyone at work. I wore navy and didn't look at Sylvie when I entered the room. She was there, of course, flanked by a lawyer who looked expensive and nervous. The judge was efficient. Elise was precise. The boutique's finances, the contracts, the transfers, they all spoke louder than Sylvie's claims. She wasn't manipulated, Elise said, her voice steady. She was rescued. And now, with the business stable and profitable, she regrets the price of her survival. Sylvie wouldn't look at me. Her lawyer fumbled with emotional language, how I'd been cold, calculating, emotionally withholding. Words meant to sting, not convince. But they didn't sting. Not anymore. After 45 minutes, the judge sighed. Dismissed, he said. With prejudice. Just like that, the noise ended. But what followed wasn't peace. It was a strange, hollow stillness. There was no phone call. No message. Not even a cold, clipped apology wrapped in self-preservation. Just nothing. Not from Sylvie. Not from my father. Not even a forwarded article from my mother, who used to email links to stories I hadn't asked for and never read. That absence used to feel like grief. Now, it just felt like space. Space I could finally use. You okay? Elise asked me outside the courtroom. I'm not angry, I said quietly. That's the part that surprises me. She gave a soft nod and left it at that. 4 days afterward, I waited for the ache to return. It didn't. I had feared this kind of silence my whole life, thought it would collapse me. But it didn't feel like falling. It felt like standing alone, for once, on solid ground. There was no dramatic realization. No grand act of forgiveness. Just little things that started to shift. I unsubscribed from the family group chat I was always added to but rarely spoken in. I changed the name of the folder from Records to Closure, and dragged it to an external drive. I called the boutique's accountant and told her to direct everything to Sylvie from now on. And finally, one quiet evening, I sat with my journal and wrote 2 words that didn't feel bitter, just honest. Enough now. That was it. People think healing is dramatic. It's not. Sometimes it's a slow, steady deletion of things you thought you needed. Sometimes it's the quiet decision not to care anymore, not out of spite, but out of mercy for yourself. I didn't tell anyone about the lawsuit. Not my coworkers, not my friends. It was mine to carry, and now mine to set down. Weeks passed. Then a month. I saw Sylvie's boutique featured in a local magazine. They called her a tenacious visionary. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile either. I just turned the page. One evening, a mutual friend texted, "Did you ever patch things up with your sister?" I typed, "No." Then deleted it. I wrote instead, "We've both moved on." And I think that was true. There were no grand family dinners after that. No reconciliation arcs. Just a shift. They stopped reaching out. And I stopped checking. Sometimes people think the absence of family is a tragedy. But sometimes, it's just an adjustment. We outgrow clothes. We outgrow dreams. Sometimes, we outgrow people too. The love I had for them wasn't fake. But it was based on a version of myself that no longer existed. A version that thought I had to earn warmth. That thought being reliable was the only way to be seen. Now, I know better. Love that needs to be bought isn't love. It's debt. And I'm done paying. I didn't start painting again because I needed healing. I started because, for once, I didn't need a reason. The canvases weren't shared. No photos posted. No compliments fished for. Just brush to cloth, silence to color. It felt like taking my own hand for the first time. There was no dramatic return to art. I didn't announce it. I didn't even call it returning. I just cleared a corner in my apartment, picked up some cheap acrylics, and let my hands move. Not to express pain. Not to process trauma. Just to exist. One of the paintings, a quiet blend of gray and deep green, stayed unfinished for weeks. Not because I lost interest, but because I wasn't rushing anymore. For the first time, nothing urgent was chasing me. Then, out of nowhere, I got the email. A local women's leadership group wanted me to speak on boundaries and burnout. At first, I laughed. Not in a mean way, just surprised that anyone noticed I had something worth saying. I almost declined. The idea of being seen, fully seen, made my stomach tighten. But then I thought about all the years I let silence wrap around me like a shield. Saying yes wasn't bravery. It was something smaller. More grounded. It was choice. I kept the talk simple. No slideshow. No rehearsed story arc. Just me, standing in a borrowed blazer, holding the microphone loosely. I told them about the small things. The time I paid my sister's rent without being asked. The years I never took a vacation because someone needed to be stable. The birthdays I planned for others while mine passed unnoticed. The quiet humiliation of being called reliable like it was a compliment, when it was really a dismissal. I didn't blame them. That's what I made clear. It wasn't a blame story. It was a naming story. Saying no wasn't revenge, I told the room. It was remembering I had a name. They were quiet afterward. Not the polite kind of quiet, the kind that comes from recognition. Afterward, a woman maybe 15 years older than me came up, eyes wet but steady. She said, "I think I forgot my own name too." I didn't hug her. I just nodded. Sometimes that's enough. A week later, I got a text from my mother. Just 7 words, "Hope you're okay. Let me know sometime." No apology. No reflection. Just a vague tether thrown into the air like it might catch something. Maybe guilt. Maybe habit. I read it once and didn't respond. Not out of bitterness. Out of peace. I didn't owe an answer to someone who never asked a real question. That used to feel cold. Now it felt like clean boundaries, the kind that don't have to be spoken to be honored. I painted more. I slept better. I started saying no to things that didn't need me. I stopped explaining myself after the no. And in the quiet that followed, I didn't miss the noise. People think reclaiming your life is loud, a grand exit, a furious declaration. But it's not. It's tiny shifts. It's keeping your phone on Do Not Disturb, and letting the dishes sit until you're ready. It's letting your name mean something more than just the role you filled in someone else's script. One night, I finished the gray and green painting. I didn't title it. Just hung it on the wall near the window, where the light could hit it around 10 a.m. I looked at it, not with pride, but with presence. It didn't need to mean anything. It was mine. So was the silence. So was the voice I kept. So was the life I was finally living, not out of obligation, not to be thanked, not to be seen. But because I remembered I existed before anyone needed me. And I still do.